Your mind tells you a lie, and you believe it. That anxiety when your boss emails, that irritation in traffic, that sinking feeling when a friend goes quiet. They're not just reactions, they're the result of an agreement, a silent, automatic agreement you never actually made. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus gave us the key. He said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them." This is about mastering that view, the Stoic discipline of assent. It's an ancient mental art. The art of becoming the gatekeeper of your own judgment. By the end, you'll have a framework, a practical one, to pause, to interrogate the automatic stories your mind spins. To reclaim control, that leads to clarity, to a much quieter. We'll see how your brain is wired to deceive you. We'll learn to spot the moment a thought becomes a belief. And we'll discover how to replace mental fiction, how to replace it with a truthful perspective. So, what's one thought you accepted today, one that might not be serving you? Every emotional reaction starts with an impression. That's the first gate. The Stoics had a word for it, phantasiae. It's the raw data, a sound, a sight. A memory that just appears, a tightness in your chest. These aren't facts, they're not truths, they're suggestions, your mind's first rough draft of what's happening. Epictetus said it clearly. He said people aren't disturbed by things, but by their judgments about those things. The thing is just the thing. The impression is just a signal. The disturbance comes later. It comes when you sign your name to the judgment. Take a critical comment from someone you respect. The sound in your ear, that's the event. The immediate flinch inside, that heat, that's the impression. It's neutral data. It just is, but almost instantly, your mind moves past it. It builds a story. They think I'm incompetent. They've lost respect. This will damage everything. That story is the judgment, and that judgment is what you feel. The hurt, the anger, the anxiety. The impression was just a knock at the door. The judgment is you flinging it open and letting the turmoil move in. So here's something to try. Think of a recent frustration. A worry. Before the story took over, what was the raw impression? Was it a tone of voice during a meeting? A notification lighting up your phone? One line in an email? Try to isolate that. See if you can hold it, even for a second, as just sensory input, before your mind's narrative machine starts up and tells you what it means. That space, that small gap between the impression and the judgment, that's where your freedom is. You have the ability to pause between a thought and your belief in it. That pause is the whole battleground. The Stoics had a word for this moment of choice, synchatathesis, assent. It's the conscious act of agreeing with an impression or rejecting it. This isn't about controlling the world. It's about becoming the sole authority over your own inner citadel, your ruling faculty. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this in his private journal. He said you have the power to strip away the opinion attached to your raw impression. You can refuse it passage. That is the only thing that is ever truly within your control. Not the event itself, not the initial feeling, but your signature on the story your mind is trying to tell you. Think of your mind as a courtroom. Every impression is a piece of evidence presented by a very persuasive lawyer. A very dramatic lawyer, and for your whole life you've been the judge who immediately bangs the gavel. Guilty as charged, case closed, without even hearing a defense. The discipline of assent is learning to stop that automatic gavel. It's you, the judge, leaning forward, saying, "Hold on, let's examine this evidence. Is it factual? Is it helpful? Is it the whole story?" Your power isn't in stopping the lawyer from speaking. It's in withholding your verdict until you've deliberated. Here's a practical moment. You see an email notification from your boss. The subject line says, "We need to talk." The impression hits instantly, a tightness. A quickening pulse. The automatic story follows just as fast. I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong, this is going to be bad. That story is the lawyer's closing argument. Assent is the old way, instantly believing it, letting the anxiety flood your system for the next hour. The new practice is to catch the story as it forms. To notice the thought, this is bad news, and to consciously choose not to assent yet. You might say to yourself, that is one interpretation. The email contains words. I will read the words when I'm ready, and then I will know what they mean. You're not denying the feeling. You're simply refusing to sign the contract that says the feeling tells the truth. So consider this. What is one automatic thought you commonly assent to without question? Is it the thought that a quiet evening alone means you are lonely? Is it the thought that a mistake at work defines your competence? That pang of jealousy when you see someone else's success, and the immediate story that you are falling behind? Identify just one, because that identification is the first act of taking back the gavel. It's the moment you realize you've been living in a courtroom of your own making. And you've just discovered you are the judge. Your mind, untrained, is like an alarm system that's too sensitive. It's always going off, signaling danger when there isn't any. That's not a flaw in you, it's actually a feature. Evolution built it that way over thousands of years. Your brain's main purpose wasn't to make you happy. It was to keep you alive, so it developed this strong negativity bias, a hair trigger. It's always scanning for threats, jumping to conclusions, filling in the blanks with the worst possible thing. Back when there were predators and rival tribes, a rustle in the bushes was better seen as a lion, not the wind, better to be safe and terrified than calm and eaten. But now the rustle is a vague text, the predator is a critical comment online, the alarm bell rings just as loud, but the threat is almost never real. That's the default mind. It personalizes things. It takes a neutral event and assumes it's about you. It catastrophizes. It turns a small problem into a total disaster. And it does all of this automatically. It presents these distorted impressions to you as if they're undeniable facts. The Stoics knew about this wiring. They called these automatic distortions preconceptions, faulty reasoning patterns we mistake for truth. Seneca saw it clearly. He said we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. You don't just experience the event, you experience the whole tragic play your mind writes and directs and stars in, all before anything actually happens. Take a modern example. A friend doesn't text you back. The impression is just silence, but the default mind doesn't stop there. It starts working immediately. It personalizes, they're ignoring me. It catastrophizes, I must have said something wrong, they're upset, the friendship is changing. It builds a whole narrative from one single data point, complete with dialogue and emotional fallout. Then your friend finally replies, sorry, my phone died, and you've already lived through an hour of mental anguish. You assented to a fiction, the alarm was blaring, but there was no fire. So here's a question to sit with. What's one common story your mind tells you that's probably more fiction than fact? Is it the story that a mistake makes you a fraud, that a quiet weekend means you're missing out, that a moment of social awkwardness will be remembered forever? Name that story, because recognizing the script is the first step to changing the channel. The discipline of assent starts with a pause. That's the first thing. It's the space between something happening and your reaction to it. You step back from your own thoughts. You're not trying to stop the feeling. You're not forcing calm. It's simpler than that. You're just making a little room, enough to see the thought clearly before you decide to believe it. Epictetus had the instruction for this. He said, don't get swept up by how strong the feeling is. Instead, tell it to wait. Let me see who you are. Let me see what you represent. That word, wait, is the whole practice. It's you taking back control from a mind that's already starting to run. Take a frustrating commute. Someone cuts you off. The immediate feeling is a jolt. A flash of heat, the automatic story is anger, injustice, a personal slight. The old way was to agree instantly, to ride that wave of irritation and let it ruin your morning. The new practice is to put in one beat, feel the jolt, and before the story fully forms, just say wait. In that tiny space, you might notice the thought, this person is rude. And you might ask, is that a fact or is it my interpretation? Could they be distracted? Could they be in a real hurry? The event doesn't change, but your relationship to it changes completely. You stop being a passenger in your own reaction. You become the observer, or take getting critical feedback. The words land, the impression is a sting. A tightness in your chest, the automatic mind screams failure, attack, defend yourself. The pause is the breath you take before you speak or type a reply. It's the moment you decide consciously, I will not let this impression write my response. I will look at it first. In that space, you get your sovereignty back. So here's a simple thing to try today. Pick one minor irritation, a long line, a dropped call, spilled coffee. When you feel that familiar surge, practice the pause. Even for 2 seconds, don't try to change the feeling. Just create a sliver of space between the feeling and the story you tell about it. Notice what happens in that gap. You might find the story loses its power the moment you stop automatically agreeing with it. You move from pausing to prosecuting. You take that impression you've been holding at a distance and you put it on the stand. The Stoics had a method for this, a cross-examination of your own thoughts. It's a framework of 3 questions. First, is this about something within my control? Second, is it objectively true or is it just a plausible story? And third, if I accept this thought, is it useful for building my character? Is it virtuous? That process turns a vague feeling into a clear choice. It's the practical tool that makes the pause powerful. The roots of this go back to Socrates before the Stoics. He said the unexamined life is not worth living. The Stoics took that to heart. They believed the unexamined thought is not worth believing. That first question cuts through the noise. Is this about something within my control? The Stoics divided the world into 2 categories. What is up to us and what is not? Our judgments, our impulses, our desires and aversions, that's our domain. Everything else, the actions of others, our reputation, our health, our wealth, the past, the future, those are not fully ours, they're externals. So when an impression arrives, you sort it. Take the thought, my presentation will be a disaster. You ask, is the final outcome entirely within my control? The honest answer is no. You control your preparation. You control your effort. You control showing up and speaking. You don't control the technology working perfectly, or the mood of the audience, or the specific thoughts of your boss. By identifying that, you drain the anxiety of its false power. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You focus your energy on what you can actually influence. Your preparation, your mindset. The second question is about truth. Is this impression a fact or just a compelling narrative? The thought, my presentation will be a disaster, feels true because it's vivid and scary. But is it a fact? No. It's a prediction about an event that hasn't happened. It's a story your mind is telling based on fear, not evidence. You might have evidence you're nervous, that's a fact. You might have evidence that past presentations were challenging. That could be a fact, but the leap from that to total disaster is a fiction. You separate the data from the drama. The third question is about purpose. Is accepting this thought useful for my character? Does it help me be courageous, wise, just temperate? Or does it feed fear, procrastination, self-doubt? Even if there's a kernel of truth in your nervousness, what good does believing the disaster story do? It paralyzes you. It makes your preparation frantic or fearful. It robs you of the clarity and calm that would actually help you perform well. Accepting it serves no virtuous end, so you reject it, not because it's impossible, but because believing it is useless. It doesn't help you become who you want to be. You walk through it with that one thought: my presentation will be a disaster. 1. Control. The outcome isn't fully mine, so I release my grip on it and focus on my preparation. 2. Truth. It's a fearful prediction, not a fact. The fact is I am prepared, or I need to prepare more. 3. Usefulness. Believing this only creates suffering and hinders my performance. It is not virtuous, therefore I withhold my assent. I choose a different, more truthful thought. I am prepared and I will do my best. The entire emotional landscape shifts. So you have these 3 questions for any troubling impression. Is it within my control? Is it objectively true? Is accepting it useful for my character? Take a current worry right now and put it through that cross-examination. Watch what happens to its power when you stop taking its word for granted. Epictetus begins with a simple division. Some things are up to us and some are not. That's the first line of his handbook. He doesn't start with a theory. He starts with a sorting mechanism. It's a filter, a practical one, and maybe the hardest one to use for any thought that comes to you. Your job is to learn the difference. To sort with honesty without any sugarcoating. What's up to us, our opinions, our impulses, what we want, what we avoid. Basically, anything that's our own doing. What's not up to us, our body, our property, our reputation, our job, anything that isn't our own doing. And Epictetus warns, the moment you confuse what belongs to someone else for what belongs to you, you're handed over to them. You become a slave to externals. Your peace then depends on the weather, or the traffic, or the mood of a stranger. That's the root of the trouble, really. We keep agreeing with impressions about things we can't control, and then we suffer the consequences of a promise we never had the power to keep. It's like a mental property law. You are the sole owner of your judgment. That's your estate. Everything outside of that, other people's actions, past events, future outcomes, what the world thinks, that's not your land. You might visit it, you might have an interest, but you don't hold the deed. So when an impression knocks, your first question has to be, is this a matter of my property? Is this about my judgment, my effort, my character? Or is it about someone else's property, their choices, their reactions, the roll of the dice? If it's about their property, you have no right to sign for it. You withhold your assent. You let the mail for the wrong address go undelivered. Take a common example. You're driving and you hit terrible traffic. The impression arrives, this is terrible, I'm going to be late, this ruins everything. Now apply the filter. Is the traffic itself up to you? Can you, right now, command the other cars to vanish? Can you control the accident ahead or the timing of the lights? No, that's externality. It's not your property, but what is yours, your patience in the traffic. Your decision to use the time, your judgment about whether this ruins the day, that's entirely your domain. The old, automatic mind agrees with the impression about the traffic, the thing you can't control, and you feel helpless, angry, stressed. The trained mind withholds assent from that external story. It turns its attention inward to what is actually its own. It might say, the traffic is what it is. My task is to manage my reaction to it. I can choose to listen to an audiobook. I can choose to breathe calmly. I can choose to call and let someone know I'll be delayed. The event hasn't changed, but your entire experience of it has transformed. Because you stopped trying to control what was never yours to control. That's the foundational move. Before you even ask if a thought is true or useful, you ask if it's yours to worry about. Is the thought, my colleague doesn't like me, about your property or theirs? Their feelings, their opinions, that's their estate. Your conduct, your integrity, your fairness, that's yours. You can only ever be responsible for what happens on your own land. Trying to tend someone else's emotional garden is a sure path to frustration. So here's a challenge. Bring to mind your top 3 current stresses, the things that keep your mind buzzing at night. Now for each one, apply Epictetus's filter. Is this thing, at its core, about what is up to you, or is it about what is not? Be brutally honest. You might find that a vast amount of your mental energy is spent agreeing with stories about territories you were never meant to govern. And in that realization, a relief can begin. The weight wasn't yours to carry in the first place. The word maybe, it sounds almost weak, but in Stoic thinking, it's not indecision. It's strength. It's saying, I don't know yet, and I won't pretend I do. That's the discipline, not having an opinion on everything, especially things that are unclear. It's an uncluttered mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote about that, about not troubling your mind with judgments on things that don't concern it. The world gives you endless dramas, rumors, things that aren't clear. Your automatic mind wants to jump in, pick a side, have a strong feeling, but the trained mind holds back because forming a firm belief on incomplete information, that's a kind of self-enslavement. You chain yourself to a story that might be false. Think of a rumor at work. Someone whispers layoffs are coming. A project is doomed. The impression hits with a jolt of fear. Your automatic mind wants to assent right away, believe the rumor, start planning for disaster. But what do you actually know? You heard a whisper. That's the only fact. Everything else is speculation. The Stoic practice is to consciously, internally, say maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't have enough information to judge this. So I won't let this uncertain story dictate my inner state today. You withhold your assent from the catastrophic narrative. You focus on what is certain. Your own work, your integrity, the present moment, that's not denial. It's protecting your mental clarity or ambiguous social cues. A friend gives a short reply to a message. A partner is quiet over dinner. The automatic mind races. They're angry with me. I did something wrong. The relationship is in trouble. Each of those is a story. A possible interpretation, but it's not the only one. They could be tired, preoccupied with a problem of their own. They might not even realize their tone. To instantly assent to the worst-case story is to create suffering from a guess. The alternative is to hold the impression lightly, to say, maybe something is wrong. Or maybe it's not. I can choose to ask with kindness or give space without assuming a negative reason. You act from curiosity, not from believing a fiction you wrote yourself. This power of maybe extends to your own future. That anxiety about an upcoming event, a job interview, a difficult conversation, a medical test, your mind presents a vivid impression of failure, embarrassment, bad news. To assent is to live through that pain now twice. To withhold assent is to acknowledge the truth. The future is uncertain. Maybe it will go well, maybe it won't. My task isn't to know the unknowable. It's to prepare as best I can and meet whatever comes with resilience. You trade the torture of prediction for the dignity of readiness. So where in your life are you pretending to know something you can't know, forming definitive, painful judgments on shaky evidence? It might be about a person's intentions, the meaning behind a global event in the news, your own potential for success or failure in a new endeavor. Identify one area and practice the response of maybe. I withhold my judgment until I have clearer facts. In that space of not knowing, you find a tranquility that certainty could never give you. Withholding assent is only half of it. It leaves a space. If you just stop believing the false story, you're left with silence, just raw sensation. The real power is in what comes next, the rewriting. You don't just pause the critic, you give it a new script, a more truthful one. This is the proactive side. The Stoics called it forming a right opinion. An orthos logos, it's not about putting a happy thought over a painful one. That's just another lie, a kind of toxic positivity they would reject. It's about seeing the situation clearly. Seeing yourself clearly, as honestly as you can. It's about assenting to reality, not to fantasy. Whether that fantasy is a nightmare or a daydream, the Stoic ideal was to live in accordance with nature. And a huge part of that is seeing things as they are, stripped of the emotional distortion. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself, see the thing in itself. Separate the observation from the judgment. A setback is not a cosmic condemnation. It's an event. A difficult person is not a monster. They are a person. Acting from their own flawed understanding, your task is to form an impression of the event that's accurate, reasonable, and useful, if possible, for living virtuously. So take that earlier example through the full cycle. You interrogate the thought, I am a failure. You pause, you prosecute it, you find it's about an external outcome. It's an overgeneralization and it's not useful. You withhold assent. Now, instead of a mental vacuum filled with shame, you actively build a truer impression. You look at the facts. The project did not go as hoped. You made some errors. You feel disappointed. These are observations. From these, you craft a right opinion. You might say, I faced a setback, which is part of learning. I can examine what went wrong and apply those lessons next time. That statement is factual. It's within your control. It's useful. It directs energy toward improvement, not wallowing. You're not denying the difficulty. You're framing it within a larger, truer narrative. A human narrative, or take social anxiety. The automatic thought is, everyone will think I'm awkward and boring. After interrogation, you reject that. It's an unproven prediction about other minds. What's the right opinion? I feel nervous, which is natural. My task is to be present, to listen, to contribute as I am. I cannot control others' perceptions, only my own intentions. You assent to that. You walk into the room holding that truth, not the fear. This is the daily practice. Mental renovation. You catch the old crumbling story, you tear it down with reason, and then, deliberately, you build a sturdier structure, a more honest one. In its place, it might be less dramatic, certainly less emotionally charged, but it is solid ground. You can stand on it. So here is the practice for today. Identify one persistent piece of negative self-talk, that old recording, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up, I don't belong here. Write it down. Then, beside it, write the most compassionate, factual, useful rewrite you can manage. Not a cheerleading slogan, but a statement a wise and kind observer would make. About the situation, what is the right opinion? This act of rewriting is where you stop being a victim of your mind's lies and become the author of your own truth. Our minds tell us what we want to hear, or what we're afraid is true. That's the engine behind our automatic agreement. It's not just thoughts appearing. It's which thoughts we're desperate to accept, which ones we're terrified to question. Our desires and our aversions, they're like magnets. They pull certain impressions forward and dress them up as facts. They bypass the interrogation because we want the answer to be yes, or we're too afraid for it to be no. This is where the discipline of assent meets the discipline of desire. Two sides of the same coin. Epictetus put it starkly. We're disturbed when we attach our desires to things outside our control. When you crave an outcome, you hand over the keys to your peace. Your mind, eager to satisfy that craving, will start agreeing with any impression that seems to promise it. It'll ignore warnings. It'll inflate small hopes into certainties. All to feed the desire. The reverse is just as strong. When you're averse to something, when you fear it, your mind becomes a hyper-vigilant sentry. It will assent to any shadow that looks like the thing you dread. Turning whispers into shouts, minor things into full catastrophes, because it's trying to protect you from what you fear, but in doing that, it creates the very disturbance it claims to prevent. Take a practical case. Say you deeply desire a promotion. You've worked hard. You feel you deserve it. That desire is a current running under everything. So when your boss gives you a vague piece of positive feedback, your mind doesn't just hear a compliment. It assents to a whole story. This is it. The promotion is guaranteed. They're hinting at it. I should start planning for the new role. You bypassed the interrogation. You didn't ask if it was a fact or just a hopeful interpretation. The desire did the thinking for you, and when the promotion goes to someone else, the crash isn't just disappointment. It's the collapse of a reality you built by agreeing with your own wishes. Now the flip side, aversion, a deep fear of illness for instance. That aversion tunes your awareness to a fever pitch, a minor ache, a slight fatigue. A random sensation. Your mind, terrified of what you fear, doesn't treat these as neutral. It instantly assents to the worst-case story. This is the beginning of something serious. I can feel it getting worse. I need to research symptoms now. The fear commands your assent. It turns the volume up on every signal until your whole awareness is consumed by a story of doom. A story you wrote and then believed because you were afraid. In both cases, desire and aversion, you surrendered your judgment. You let an emotional craving or a deep fear sit in the judge's chair. And it passed a verdict without a trial. So here's a question to sit with. What's one strong desire or fear clouding your judgment right now? Is it the desire for a relationship to work, making you ignore signs it won't? Is it the fear of financial instability, making you see every market shift as a sign of ruin? Name the force. Just identifying that current is a step. It lets you see the thought not as truth, but as a product of a deeper pull. And in that space, you can start to ask the real questions. Not just is this thought true, but why am I so eager or so terrified to believe it? Your emotional weather doesn't come from events. It comes from which impressions you let live in your mind. Think of a painful emotion you felt recently. Anger, maybe, or anxiety, or grief. From the Stoic view, these aren't random storms that blow in from outside. They're the result of a choice you made. A choice you probably didn't realize you were making. The choice to assent, to agree that a certain story about the world is true. That's the link between the discipline of assent and what the Stoics called apatheia. Which isn't apathy, it's emotional resilience, a freedom from being tossed around by every passing feeling. It's inner stability, not because you feel nothing, but because you're no longer a slave to the first story your mind tells. Seneca wrote a lot about anger. He called it a brief madness, and he said its origin isn't in the other person's action. It's in our own judgment. Anger begins with an error of judgment, a misplaced assent. Someone says something harsh, that's the event. The impression is the sound, the words. The error is assenting to the thought, I have been intentionally disrespected. That judgment, that story you sign your name to, that's the spark. The emotion of anger is the fire that follows. It's not the words that burned you. It was your agreement with a particular interpretation of them. The same thing applies to anxiety. A future event looms. The impression is the thought of it. The error is assenting to the catastrophic prediction. This will go terribly, and I won't be able to handle it. That judgment summons the full experience of anxiety. The racing heart, the dread. By managing your assent, you're not suppressing the feeling. You're removing the fuel before the fire can start. Let's trace a chain all the way through. You send a detailed proposal to a colleague. They reply with a one-line email. It says, noted. The raw impression is just 2 words on a screen. The automatic judgment, the story you might assent to, is immediate. They're dismissing my work. They think it's unimportant. All that effort was for nothing. If you grant that story citizenship in your mind, if you believe it, the emotional consequence is a mix of anger and hurt. You feel slighted. Now break the chain at the point of assent. You receive the same email. You feel the initial jolt, but you pause, you interrogate. Is the thought they are dismissing me a fact or an interpretation? It's purely an interpretation. What are other possible interpretations? They're incredibly busy. They received it and will review it later. They're not great at email. By withholding assent from the first, most painful story, you prevent the emotional storm from ever forming. You might feel a flicker of disappointment, but it doesn't solidify into lasting distress. you've managed your emotional weather by managing your judgments. This is the practical path to resilience. It's not about building a thicker skin to endure blasts of emotion. It's about installing better filters so fewer blasts get through in the first place. Your inner peace becomes less about what happens to you and more about what you choose to make of what happens to you. So, here's a reflective prompt. Think of a recent episode of distress, however small, a moment of irritation, a spike of worry. Trace it back before the feeling. What was the story? What was the specific thought you believed in that moment? And before that story, what was the raw impression? See if you can identify the precise link in the chain where your assent turned a neutral event into a source of suffering. In that identification lies your power to choose differently next time. You get better at catching yourself by practicing after the moment. You build the skill in the quiet. The Stoics had a tool for this, a daily ritual, an evening review, a personal audit of your mental integrity. You sit with the day that just passed, not to judge yourself harshly, but to learn from your own patterns. To see where your judgment was clear and where it was clouded. Seneca wrote about this. He described ending each day with a conversation with himself. He would ask, what bad habit have you cured today? What fault have you resisted? In what part are you better? His focus wasn't on worldly achievements. It was on the state of his own character, on the quality of his judgments. This nightly review was his way of sharpening the tool of assent, so it would cut more cleanly the next day. The practice is simple in structure. You set aside 5 minutes, maybe just before bed. You look back over the day and you ask yourself 3 core questions. First, where did I assent too quickly today? Where did I automatically believe a story that caused me distress? This isn't about blame. It's about spotting the automatic signature. Maybe you read a news headline and immediately felt a wave of dread, accepting a grim narrative without question. Or a family member made an offhand comment, and you instantly agreed with the thought that they were criticizing you. You identify the moment, you note the specific impression you bought into. The second question is positive reinforcement. Where did I withhold assent well? Where did I create that pause and choose a more truthful perspective? Celebrate this. It could be as small as noticing the thought, this traffic is ruining my day, and deciding it was just a delay. Or it could be bigger, like receiving critical feedback and seeing it as information, not a personal attack. By acknowledging these wins, you wire the new habit more deeply. The third question is diagnostic. What false impression did I believe, and what was the underlying desire or fear that made it so convincing? This gets to the root. You believed a friend was upset with you. Was that because you have a deep desire for harmony? You believed a work mistake meant you were incompetent. Was that driven by a fear of being exposed? Understanding the emotional magnet behind your assent gives you power. You're not just managing thoughts. You're understanding the part of you that's eager to believe them. Here's a simple template to begin. Take out a notebook or use the Notes app on your phone. Write down 2 or 3 key moments from your day. For each, note the raw impression. Then, write the automatic judgment you felt tempted to assent to. Finally, write what a more truthful, useful judgment would have been. That's it. You're not writing an essay. You're creating a brief record of your mind's activity. Over time, this log becomes a map of your own mental traps, and with that map, you can start to navigate around them. So the invitation is this. Tonight, before you sleep, give yourself 5 minutes, sit quietly, review the day through this lens of assent. Find one moment where your agreement was hasty and one where you showed restraint. Do this without self-criticism, with the curiosity of a scientist studying a system, the system of your own mind. This daily audit is how you move the discipline from a concept you understand to a skill you live by. It turns philosophy into practice, one evening at a time. You wake up and your phone is already there. Headlines, notifications, snippets of other people's lives. Each one is an impression designed to get a reaction: outrage, envy, a sense of fear or urgency. The Stoic challenge: it's a marathon now. Your mind isn't just wrestling with your own day. It's contending with a global fire hose of narratives. Each one wants your immediate belief, your emotional investment. So the discipline of assent, it moves from philosophy to survival. A necessary skill to navigate this and keep your peace. You have to filter. You have to become a master of that filtration. Marcus Aurelius wrote about walking through a marketplace, hearing the shouts of vendors, choosing not to be disturbed by the chatter. He said to remind yourself, what are these people's opinions to you? Now the marketplace is infinite. The timeline is the new agora. Every post, every hot take, every breaking news alert, they're all vendors shouting for your attention and for your assent. The principle still applies. It's perfectly applicable. The digital impression, the shocking headline, the polarizing tweet, the vacation photo that sparks envy, it's just data. It isn't a command to feel anything. Your judgment about it, that's what creates the weather inside you. To automatically agree with every provocative impression is to let strangers design your emotional day. 1,000 strangers. So how do you practice this while you're scrolling? It starts with the same intentional pause but applied to the screen. You see a headline. It sparks instant anger or anxiety. Your thumb hovers, ready to tap, to comment, to dive into the fray. That's the critical moment. That's the modern equivalent of Epictetus's wait. You physically stop scrolling. You take one breath, and you ask, before I react, before I even fully believe this, what am I actually looking at? You separate the designed provocation from the underlying event. The headline says one thing. The article, if you read it, might say another. Your task is to withhold your verdict until you've deliberated. Then you bring in the 3 questions. First, control. Is this story about something within my sphere of influence? A political scandal on another continent, a celebrity feud, a stranger's opinion online. These are classic externals. Assenting to them as sources of personal outrage is like signing a mortgage for a house you'll never own. It burdens you with a responsibility that isn't yours. Your energy is better spent on what you can actually affect: your local community, your own conduct, your immediate environment. Second, truth. Is this impression a full fact, or is it a narrative? Is that social media post presenting a nuanced situation as a simple story with a villain and a victim? Is that news alert using emotional language to frame the event? Your assent should go to verifiable facts, not to the emotional packaging they come in. Third, usefulness. Does believing this story help you live with more wisdom, justice, or courage? Does getting outraged by a simplified online argument make you more compassionate? Does comparing your life to a curated highlight reel make you more content? Often, the answer is no. The digital impression fails the virtue test, so you consciously reject it. You scroll past, not with apathy but with an empowered choice, to not let that narrative occupy your mind. Here's a challenge. For 1 hour of your online time today, conduct a digital assent audit. Don't change your behavior yet, just observe. Notice the impressions that fly at you, the news notification, the friend's accomplishment post, the controversial opinion in a thread. For each one, note your automatic internal judgment. Did I instantly believe that headline? Did I immediately feel a pang of comparison? Did I accept that hot take as truth? Just label it: assented to envy, withheld assent from outrage bait. This isn't about judging yourself. It's about gathering data on how your mind is being shaped by the stream. You might be shocked by how many unsigned contracts you've been accepting before breakfast. This audit makes the invisible process visible, and in that visibility, you find your power to choose differently. To curate not just your feed, but your very agreement with it. True compassion starts when we stop our automatic judgments. We think compassion is feeling sorry for someone, but that pity is usually built on a judgment. A judgment we never really questioned. The real work begins earlier. It begins when we choose not to agree with the story that someone is just bad or wrong or broken. The discipline of assent, when you turn it outward, becomes a tool for understanding. It lets us separate a person's action which is external from the harsh label our mind wants to stick on their character. That label is our own creation. It's our agreement with a narrow impression. We do this all the time. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we agree with the thought they're a rude person. A coworker misses a deadline, and we agree they're lazy. A family member says something hurtful, and we agree they're selfish. In each case, we take one data point and action, and we build a whole identity around it. We give that story a home in our mind, and from that story come all our feelings afterward: irritation, resentment, distance. We think we're reacting to them, but we're really reacting to the fiction we just wrote and then believed. The Stoics had a concept for a different way of seeing: sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things, the idea that we're all part of a shared whole. This wasn't just a nice sentiment. It was a logical foundation for holding back those harsh judgments. If we're all connected, then judging another person harshly is like a foot being angry at the hand for being clumsy. It's a misunderstanding of the shared body. Marcus Aurelius drilled this into himself. He'd write reminders: when people act against you, understand they do it because they believe it's the right or necessary thing to do. They're acting from their own flawed reasoning, their own wounds, their own limited perspective. To be angry at them, he said, is as pointless as being angry at a stone for being hard. It's their nature to act from what they know. This isn't about excusing harmful behavior. It's about understanding where it comes from. Withholding assent from the label "they are bad" creates a space. In that space, you can ask different questions. What pain or fear might be driving this action? What information do they not have? What pressure are they under that I can't see? You move from being a judge to being an investigator of human nature. Your goal shifts from assigning blame to understanding cause, and from that understanding, a clearer, calmer response becomes possible. Take a practical example. A colleague makes a significant mistake. The automatic impression is a wave of frustration. The story your mind offers is they're incompetent, they've let the whole team down. If you assent to that, your interaction with them will be colored by that belief. It might come out as coldness, sharp criticism, silent resentment. Now apply the discipline. Pause, withhold assent from that final verdict. Interrogate it. Is the thought they are incompetent a fact or an interpretation of one event? It's an interpretation. What other interpretations could fit the facts? Maybe they're under immense personal pressure you know nothing about. Maybe they received unclear instructions. Maybe they're exhausted and this was a rare lapse. By choosing not to believe the worst label story, you create room for curiosity. You can then address the actual problem, the mistake, from a place of collaborative problem solving instead of from a summit of judgment. You might say, that didn't go as planned. Let's figure out what happened so we can fix it and prevent it next time. The outcome is better and the human connection stays intact. So here's a reflective prompt. Think of someone you've judged harshly recently. A stranger, a colleague, a loved one. What was the specific action that triggered you? Now identify the automatic impression you assented to. What was the label you placed on them? They're inconsiderate, they're unreliable, they're thoughtless. Now, just for a moment, try to withhold that assent. See the action as separate from the person's entire being. Can you picture a context, a reason, a human frailty that might explain the action without requiring you to condemn the whole person? This exercise doesn't force you to approve of what they did. It just asks you to stop believing the story that their action defines them absolutely. In that small space of withheld judgment, compassion has room to grow. Not as a feeling you force, but as a clarity that emerges when you stop lying to yourself about who other people are. The body sends signals. a sharp pain in your back, or a wave of fatigue, or a headache starting. These are physical impressions, raw data. They aren't commands to suffer. The suffering comes next. It's the story your mind builds on top of the sensation. This is unbearable. This will ruin my day. This means I'm weak. That's the catastrophic story. The discipline extends here into physical experience. It asks you to separate the signal from the commentary. Epictetus had a lame leg. He made this distinction. He said the lameness is an impediment to your leg, but not to your will. The physical fact is one thing. Your judgment about what that fact means for your life, your character, your capacity for virtue, that's another thing entirely. The pain is in the body, the story about the pain is in the mind, and you have authority over only one of those. Marcus Aurelius dealt with chronic illness. He wrote about this. He said pain is neither unbearable nor unending, if you remember its limits and don't add to it in your imagination. The judgment, the fearful projection, that's what magnifies the sensation into something monstrous. Stoic courage in the face of physical hardship isn't about denying the feeling. It's about assenting only to the feeling itself and refusing to sign the contract that says the feeling dictates your spirit. It's about saying, there's a sensation in my knee. That's the fact. The thought, I cannot go on, is a story. I choose not to live inside that story. I'll live with the sensation and direct my will toward what I can still do. This is practical. Take a persistent headache. The raw impression is a throbbing pressure. Almost instantly, the mind layers on its judgments. I can't focus. My plans are ruined. Why does this always happen to me? If you assent to those thoughts, the headache becomes a personal catastrophe. It colors your whole world with frustration. The practice is to notice the sensation, acknowledge it plainly, and then consciously withhold your agreement from the despairing narrative. You might say, there is discomfort present. My task is to tend to it kindly if I can, and to continue with my intentions as I am able. This doesn't magically remove the pain. It removes the secondary suffering, the mental storm you were adding on top. The experience transforms from a global emergency into a localized sensation you're navigating. Apply this to fatigue. The body signals tiredness. The mind often spins a tale of incapacity. I'm too tired to be good company. I can't possibly finish this task. I'll never have the energy I need. By assenting only to the physical signal, you can respond with clarity. I feel tired. That's information. Maybe I need rest. Maybe I can proceed slowly with adjusted expectations. The story of total incapacity is a lie your tired mind is telling you, and you have the power to reject it. So here's a small experiment. Find a minor physical discomfort right now. A slight ache, a stiffness, a bit of hunger or thirst. Just observe the pure sensation. Where exactly is it located? What's its texture? Then notice the very first thought that arises about it. Is it a complaint, a prediction of it getting worse? A label of annoyance? See if you can hold the sensation and let the thought pass by without following it, without believing it, even for a few moments. This is the training ground, learning to feel what's true in the body without buying the fearful fiction the mind tries to sell you about it. In that space, you find a resilience. It's not physical, it's profoundly human. The mind lies most convincingly about times that don't exist, the past and the future. Those are its favorite theaters. It stages these elaborate productions there, regret and dread, and the discipline of assent is your ticket out. It's the reminder that an impression about what might happen, or what already did, is still just an impression. A mental construct. You can't verify it with your senses, not in this moment. It's a ghost, and your agreement is what gives it substance, gives it weight in your present life. Seneca saw this trap clearly. He wrote that we have this habit. We exaggerate or imagine or anticipate sorrow. We let the future torment us before it arrives. We borrow trouble from a time that isn't here, and we do the same with the past. We pay interest on a debt that's already been settled. Your power is in recognizing that these aren't events happening to you. They're stories you're telling yourself, and you're the one choosing to believe them. Take future tripping, that gnawing anxiety about an upcoming meeting. The impression isn't the meeting itself, it's a mental movie your mind is screening, a movie of you stumbling over your words, faces staring back in disapproval. A negative outcome, that movie feels incredibly real. It triggers a physical stress response, as if the event were happening right now, but the Stoic practice is to pause the film. To step out of the theater, to look at the projector and ask, is this a documentary of facts or a work of fiction? Your task is to withhold assent from that catastrophic screenplay. You interrogate it, is this outcome within my control right now? In this moment, the answer is no. What is within my control now is my preparation, my focus on the task before me. Is this prediction objectively true? No. It's a fearful fantasy about an unwritten future. Is believing it useful? It only creates suffering now. It weakens my capacity to prepare well. So you choose a different thought. You assent to the present reality. I am preparing. I will do my best. The future remains unknown, and I meet it with my effort, not my fear. Now apply the same lens to past rumination. That cringe-worthy memory of a conversation from last week. The impression is a replay, but it's not a neutral replay. It's a director's cut, edited for maximum humiliation. It comes with a judgmental voiceover. You should have said this. You always do that. They must think you're foolish. This is the past as a prison of your own making. You are assenting to a story that interprets a finished event in the most painful way possible. Marcus Aurelius offered the antidote. He advised to confine yourself to the present. The past is gone. Your judgments about it are happening now, so you apply the discipline to the memory. You acknowledge the event happened. That is a fact, but the story that it defines you, that it was a catastrophe, that is an impression you are choosing to believe now. Is that past event within your control to change? No, it is an external. It's finished. Is your interpretation of it the only true one? Could it be seen as a simple human moment, a learning experience, a thing that matters far less to others than to you? And most importantly, does clinging to this painful story help you live with virtue today? Or does it merely poison your present with regret? You withhold your assent from the shame narrative. You choose to see the past as a series of facts, not a verdict on your worth. Here's a practical exercise. Take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On the left side, write down one specific worry about the future. Be precise, not my job, but the thought that I will fail my performance review next month. On the right side, write one specific regret about the past. Again, be precise, the thought that I embarrassed myself by speaking up in the team meeting last Tuesday. Now for each one, ask the anchoring question from the discipline of assent. Is this impression about something within my control right now, in this present moment? For the future worry, your control lies in your current work, not in the future judgment. For the past regret, your control lies in your current understanding and actions, not in rewriting history. This simple act of writing and questioning does something powerful. It pulls these phantom impressions out of the shadowy realm of feeling. It brings them into the clear light of examination. You see them for what they are, thoughts about times you cannot touch, and in that seeing you reclaim your right to choose which thoughts deserve your belief and which are merely ghosts asking for a home they should never have. Your biggest worry can shrink. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it the view from above. It's a shift in perspective. You pull back from the immediate feeling. You imagine rising up, looking down on your life, your city, the planet. You see the scale of time, and in that scale, the urgent drama starts to look different. Smaller, this isn't about ignoring your feelings. It's about making space to see them, to stop agreeing so quickly with a story that, from this new angle, might not be completely true. Marcus Aurelius used this all the time. In his private notes, he'd tell himself to look from above, to see the markets, the ships, the farms, the ceremonies. From a high mountain, he wrote, all human activity looks like ants toiling. He wasn't being cynical, he was looking for clarity. When you see your own struggles as part of this huge, ancient tapestry, their weight shifts. They don't disappear, but they lose the power to completely define your reality. That meeting you dread, that argument, that failure, from the view of a century or a continent, they're brief moments in a long story. This change in scale helps the discipline of assent. An overwhelming impression feels huge because it fills your whole mental field. There's no room for anything else. No room for reason. The view from above widens that field. It brings in other scales of space, of time, of human experience. Suddenly, there's room to breathe. Room to ask, is this impression as monumental as it feels, or is my perspective just very close to it right now? Take a work crisis. A project is falling apart. Emails are flying, your heart is racing, the impression is total disaster. The automatic story is that everything is ruined. Before you agree to that, try the view from above. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. Picture your office building from a drone's view. See the tiny figures inside. Zoom out. See your city, the rivers, the roads. Zoom out further. See the continent, the curve of the planet against space. In that vast, silent scale, where is your project crisis? It's a tiny event in a tiny building on a tiny speck. This doesn't mean the problem isn't real. It means the story of total disaster is probably a lie. The perspective creates the mental space to withhold that rash assent. To form a clearer judgment, this is a problem to be solved, not an apocalypse. You can apply this to a personal conflict, a heated argument with someone you love. The impression is all hurt and anger. It feels like the relationship is cracking. Now, take the view from above. See your house from the sky. See your street. Think of the decades of your life and theirs. See this single evening's argument as one point on a long, shared line. How does it look now? Still painful. But is it the definitive end of the story? Probably not. That space lets you pause your agreement with the catastrophic interpretation. It lets you respond from a larger understanding, not from the narrow heat of the moment. So think of your current biggest concern, the one that feels heaviest. Hold it in your mind. Now, imagine climbing to the top of the highest mountain you know. You look down, you see the landscape of your life from that height. You see the long road that brought you here and the many roads ahead. From that quiet distance, look again at your concern. Does the impression change? Does it seem as absolute, as all-consuming? That space you just created, however small, is where rational assent can begin. It's the first step back from the lie that this one thing is everything. Every act of assent is a vote for the person you're becoming. That's the whole point of the practice, really. The Stoics, they didn't see the discipline of assent as just a way to feel better. They saw it as the forge of character. The goal was to live virtuously. To build wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, and you build that character one judgment at a time. Your automatic thoughts are like seeds. The ones you water with your belief, the ones you assent to, those are the ones that grow. If you keep agreeing with impressions of jealousy, you cultivate a jealous character. If you habitually assent to thoughts of greed, you strengthen greed. If you automatically believe stories of cowardice, you train yourself to be ruled by fear. This is ethical training in its most granular form. It's you, in the quiet of your own mind, choosing which qualities to nurture and which to let wither. The Stoics held this radical tenet. They believed that virtue, living with excellence of character, was the only true good. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, those were just preferred or dispreferred indifference. They matter, but they don't define a good life. What defines a good life is the quality of your choices, and your choices spring from your judgments. Your assents, so your judgments, are the raw material of virtue. Epictetus made this link explicit. He said what upsets people isn't things themselves, but their judgments about things. And those judgments are within our power, so if you're distressed by some external thing, it's not the thing that troubles you, it's your judgment about it. And it's in your power to wipe out that judgment now, to wipe it out and replace it with one aligned with virtue. That's the profound shift. You're not just managing stress. You're sculpting your soul with every mental agreement you make or break. Take a practical contrast, a highly competitive situation at work, two people up for one promotion. An impression arrives, the thought that your rival has an unfair advantage. The automatic, untrained mind might assent to a story. I must win at all costs. I need to undermine them. Their success is my failure. If you sign that contract, if you believe that story, what virtue are you building? Not justice. Not temperance. You're building a character of insecurity, of potential injustice. Your actions will flow from that poisoned well. Now the trained mind, applying the discipline, would catch that impression. It would pause, it would interrogate. Is this thought within my control? Their advantage is not. My conduct is. Is it true? It's a fearful interpretation, not a fact. Is it useful for building my character? Does it align with courage, justice, wisdom? No. It aligns with pettiness, so you withhold assent. You consciously choose a different, virtuous judgment to assent to. You might say, I will compete with integrity. I will focus on doing my best work. Their journey is theirs, mine is mine. By assenting to that thought, you cast a vote for a character of justice and self-respect. Your actions then are rooted in strength, not fear, or a moment of physical risk like speaking up when it's uncomfortable. The automatic impression screams danger, embarrassment. The vice-laden story is, stay quiet. It's not worth the trouble, protect yourself. Assenting to that builds cowardice. Withholding assent and choosing the thought, I speak because it is right, not because it is safe, that builds courage. The event is the same. The character you build is worlds apart. So here's a reflective prompt. It might be the most important question this discipline asks. If you consistently assent to your current habitual thoughts, the ones that run on autopilot about work, about others, about yourself, what kind of character are you actively building right now? Are your mental agreements crafting a person of wisdom or of worry, of courage or of complaint, of generous justice or of jealous comparison? You don't have to answer out loud. But the mere act of asking it shines a light on the deepest purpose of this practice. It transforms it from a cognitive trick into a moral compass. Every time you create that pause, you're not just avoiding suffering. You are casting a vote for the human being you most wish to be. We outsource the truth about ourselves to other people's impressions. A casual comment becomes a law. Their praise becomes our worth. Their blame becomes our failure. It's a powerful impression, one of the most deceptive. The impression that someone else's opinion is a fact about you. The discipline of assent meets its greatest test here at this social mirror. The thought arrives vivid. They think I'm incompetent, or they think I'm brilliant. Both are dangerous. Both ask you to sign the same contract. The contract that says your value is determined by an external verdict. You feel the sting of criticism or the flush of flattery, and instantly you're tempted to assent. To agree not just that they said something, but that what they said defines something true about your character. Epictetus saw this trap. He asked his students a startling question. If someone told you your donkey was dead, would you immediately become distressed, or would you first go and check on your donkey? He used this to point out our absurdity. We treat another person's opinion as a verified fact about our own soul without ever checking the condition of our own soul first. We take their word for it. We outsource the audit of our inner worth. The impression they think I'm X is just that, an impression about what might be happening in another person's mind. It is not a direct observation of your own being. To assent to it as I am X is a colossal logical leap, and often a painful one. You are accepting a story written by someone else with their own biases, their own limited information, their own moods as the final draft of your identity. The Stoic discipline involves catching that leap mid-air, recognizing the opinion as an external, as something that belongs to the other person's property, not yours. Your reputation, what others think of you, is listed by Epictetus right alongside your body and your possessions. It is not up to you, it is a preferred or dispreferred indifferent. To chase it, to fear it, to let it dictate your self-assessment, is to hand over the keys to your inner citadel. This applies equally to blame and to praise. Criticism hurts because we assent to its underlying narrative. A colleague says your work was subpar. The raw impression is the sound of their words. The automatic judgment is, I am subpar. The discipline is to pause right there, to separate the data from the definition. The data is that they expressed a negative opinion. That is a fact. The definition that you are inherently lacking is a story. You can receive the data, the feedback, as useful information without assenting to the story that it measures your worth. You might say, they did not find this work satisfactory. I can examine it to see if there are improvements to be made. My value as a person remains separate from this single piece of work and this single opinion of it. Flattery is the more seductive trap. Someone lavishes you with praise. The impression is warm, pleasant. The automatic judgment is, I am exceptional. This feels good to believe, but it is just as much an outsourcing of your self-worth. You are allowing another's opinion to inflate your self-image. If you build your confidence on a foundation of praise, you will be devastated when that praise is absent or when criticism comes. The disciplined response is the same. Receive the compliment graciously, acknowledge the fact that it was given, but withhold assent from the grandiose story it might suggest about your permanent state. Your virtue, your character, is built through your actions and choices, not through the applause of an audience. So here is a reflective prompt. Think of a recent compliment or criticism that stuck with you. One that made you feel either puffed up or deflated. Now practice the separation. First, state the pure fact. This person said these specific words. Then state the automatic judgment you attempted to assent to. This means I am fundamentally talented or fundamentally flawed. Finally, consciously release that judgment. See it as a separate object, a story floating by. Your task is not to believe or disbelieve the other person. Your task is to tend to your own character, your own work, with integrity regardless of the noise from the gallery. In that quiet space, you stop being a reflection in a social mirror. You start being the one who holds the light. The Stoics had an exercise for this. They called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds grim, but the purpose was the opposite. It was training for assent. The idea was to calmly imagine potential challenges before they arrived. Not to dwell on them in terror, but to strip them of their power to shock you. A sudden, harsh impression carries extra force. It feels like a truth you can't question. Negative visualization weakens that force. It prepares your judgment in advance, so when life presents a difficulty, your mind isn't hijacked by the story that this is unbearable. That it's wholly unexpected. Seneca was a master of this. In his letters, he wrote about setting aside days to practice poverty. He would wear rough clothes, sleep on a hard bed, eat the plainest food. He wasn't punishing himself. He was testing his impressions. He was asking his mind, is this condition truly evil? Is it unbearable? By facing the idea in advance, he drained the future possibility of its terror. He cultivated tranquility not by hoping for the best, but by making peace with a wider range of outcomes. He trained his assent to see hardship as a circumstance, not a catastrophe. The goal was never to live in dread, but to live without being surprised into dread. Here's how it works as a practical tool. Say you have a difficult conversation looming. a performance review with a tough manager. The automatic impression when you think of it might be a knot of anxiety. The story is one of confrontation, criticism, failure. Premeditation asks you to sit with that possibility calmly before the event. You close your eyes. You mentally walk through a realistic, challenging scenario. Your manager points out several areas for improvement. Their tone is direct, perhaps cool. You feel the initial sting. Now, in this safe mental space, you practice your assent. You do not agree with the impression that this is a personal annihilation. You form a clearer, more rational judgment in advance. You might think, this is feedback. Some of it may be valid, useful for my growth. My worth is not on trial here. My work is being discussed. I can listen, clarify, respond with integrity. By rehearsing this reasoned response, you are programming your mind's default setting. When the real conversation happens, the initial impression of attack is weaker. You've already visited this territory in your mind. You are less likely to be shocked into assenting to a panicked, false narrative. You can meet the moment with a clearer judgment you prepared. Apply this to a smaller scale, a project setback, a minor loss like missing a train or a cancelled plan. Premeditate it for just a minute. Visualize the event occurring. See the email announcing the delay. Feel the flicker of frustration. Then, in your imagination, practice withholding assent from the story that this ruins everything. Practice forming the right opinion. This is a change of plans. I will adapt. My peace does not depend on this one outcome. When it happens in reality, your emotional reaction is tempered. The impression is familiar. You've already decided in a calm state how you will view it. You've inoculated your mind against the lie of total disruption. So here's a simple practice to try. Tonight or tomorrow morning, premeditate one small, potential annoyance for your day ahead. It could be the traffic on your commute, a delayed response to an important message, a tedious task you've been putting off. Don't dwell on it with worry. Simply picture it occurring. Observe the initial impression it would create. Then consciously decide in advance what your truer judgment will be. This is not a prediction of doom. It is a rehearsal of clarity. When that moment arrives, if it does, notice the difference. The space between the impression and your reaction may feel wider, quieter. You have already visited that room and you know your way around. There's a space between something happening and how you react. That space is the discipline of assent. It's the link you can learn to break. The sequence is predictable. It happens fast. An event occurs, a driver cuts you off, a colleague takes credit for your idea, a friend forgets. Then comes the impression, the raw feeling. The heat, the sting. Right after that is the moment of assent, where you agree with a judgment about it. You think, this person is malicious, this is an attack. That judgment gives birth to an impulse, the urge to shout, to retaliate, and then the action itself. The chain is built link by link, but the crucial link is your assent. Control that, and you control what comes after. Epictetus had a metaphor. A person walking stumbles over a stone. The stumble is the event, it's neutral. The problem isn't the stumble, it's the judgment the person forms, the thought, this stone is an obstacle placed here to vex me. That judgment, that agreement with a story of personal affront, sparks the anger. The stumble didn't cause the anger. The person's own assent to that interpretation did. The impulse to kick the stone flows from that unchecked judgment. Mastering assent means intercepting the process at the source. You see the stumble for what it is, a physical misstep, and you withhold the dramatic story. The impulse to lash out never forms. Take a modern scenario, the angry email. You get a message that feels dismissive. The event is the text on your screen. The impression is a flush of heat, a tightness in your chest. The automatic judgment begging for your assent is clear. This is disrespectful. I need to set this person straight right now. That judgment creates the impulse. Your fingers fly to the keyboard. You draft a reply that's defensive, accusatory. The action is clicking send, and regret often follows minutes later. Now replay it with the discipline, same event, same initial impression, but you create the pause, you feel the heat, but you don't agree with the story of intentional disrespect. You interrogate it. Is this the only interpretation? Could there be stress, a misunderstanding, a simple lack of tone? By withholding your assent from the inflammatory narrative, you drain the impulse of its fuel. The compulsion to fire back weakens. You might still choose to respond, but now it's a choice, crafted from clarity, maybe after a walk. The action is no longer a reaction. It's a response. That's practical self-mastery. So, a prompt. Identify one impulsive behavior you want to reduce, snapping at a loved one when you're tired, buying something you don't need when you feel insecure, scrolling social media when you're avoiding a task. Trace it backward. What's the impression that triggers it? Is it a feeling of being overwhelmed you interpret as I can't handle this? Is it a pang of envy you interpret as I am lacking? Find that initial judgment, that story you're agreeing to write before the impulse takes over. Simply seeing that link in your own chain is the first powerful step in learning to break it. The wisest thing you can agree to is the thought, I don't fully understand this yet. That might sound like a step back from the control we've been talking about, but it isn't. It's actually the highest form of control, to consciously agree that your view right now is incomplete, that your perception has limits. That's intellectual humility, and it comes directly from practicing this discipline. A mind that agrees too quickly and too completely with its own opinions becomes a dogmatic mind. A closed mind, it mistakes its impressions for the final map of reality. But the disciplined mind, trained to question every impression, naturally gets comfortable with uncertainty. It stays open to revision, and that openness is the very heart of the Stoic pursuit of wisdom, not as something you possess, but as a continual practice of seeing more clearly. This idea goes back long before the Stoics to Socrates. His famous statement, I know that I know nothing, wasn't an admission of ignorance, it was a method. A deliberate choice to withhold final agreement. It was the starting point for all real inquiry. The Stoics carried this forward. They saw the wise person as a perpetual student of life, always ready to correct a faulty impression with a better one. Epictetus told his students it's impossible to learn what you think you already know. The know-it-all mind has already signed all the contracts. There's no space for new information. The humble mind, the one that agrees to its own current limits, keeps the power to choose a better, truer judgment when more evidence comes in. You can apply this humility in the middle of a disagreement. The impression comes, my view is correct, theirs is wrong. It feels solid, certain. The automatic mind wants to agree fully, to dig in, to defend the territory. The disciplined mind creates the pause. It withholds full agreement from the story of your own infallibility. Instead, it might consciously agree to a different, more truthful impression. My current view might be incomplete. I might not fully understand their perspective. This doesn't mean you abandon your position. It means you hold it lightly enough to actually listen. The goal of the conversation shifts from winning to understanding. From proving a point to discovering a more complete picture, you might find points of agreement you missed. You might strengthen your own view with better reasoning. Or you might honestly revise it. Either way, you leave the interaction wiser, not just more entrenched. This applies to your internal debates too. That firm belief about how your career should go, or what a successful relationship must look like. These are often just collections of impressions you've agreed with, hardened into dogma. The practice of intellectual humility asks you to gently question the foundation. To agree just for a moment to the possibility that your map might have some errors, that the path you're so sure of might have a better alternative you haven't seen. So here's a challenging but liberating prompt. Identify one belief you hold firmly. It could be political, social, about your own capabilities, or about someone else's character. Now, for just 5 minutes, consciously entertain the possibility that your impression of this is partially wrong or incomplete. Don't try to dismantle the belief. Just create a small space of maybe I don't have the full story. What new questions come up in that space? What curiosity replaces the certainty? This isn't about undermining yourself. It's about exercising the ultimate freedom, the freedom to update your understanding of the world, and in doing that, to never be a prisoner of your own past judgments. Your faculty of assent is like a muscle. It weakens if you don't use it. It strengthens with daily reps. This isn't a philosophy you learn once and then you own it. It's a practice. You have to return to it day after day, especially on the days you forget. The goal isn't to reach a state where you never believe a false impression again. That's impossible. The human mind is wired for stories. The goal is to notice more quickly, to notice when you've signed that invisible contract, to catch yourself in the act of agreeing with a lie, and then to gently, firmly revoke your signature. That act of noticing, that correcting, that's the discipline, that's the workout. And just like physical training, you don't get stronger by reading about the exercise. You get stronger by doing it imperfectly again and again. Epictetus taught this with relentless clarity. He framed progress in these terms. He said, "Don't be discouraged if you don't achieve the grand results you imagined all at once. You aren't doing badly if you aren't there yet. You are doing badly only if you have given up trying." He compared it to a student of music who still sings off-key. The teacher doesn't beat the student for failing. The teacher corrects the note and has them try again. Your progress, he taught, is found in the falling and the getting back up. In noticing you assented to anger and resolving to pause a little longer next time. That is the entire path, not a straight line upward but a spiral. A spiral of increasing awareness. This means you have to grant yourself permission to fail at this. You will have days where you believe every anxious prediction your mind offers. You will snap at someone because you fully bought the story that they were trying to irritate you. You will spend an hour worrying about a future you cannot control. That isn't a sign the practice has failed. It is the practice, the moment you realize, I just assented to that whole dramatic narrative. That moment of recognition is a rep completed. That's the muscle growing. The discipline lives in that return, not in some mythical state of perfect detachment. So how do you build this mental muscle without getting overwhelmed? You start small. You pick one routine, neutral situation in your day, your morning commute, waiting in line for coffee, the first 5 minutes after you sit down at your desk. You make that your training ground. In that contained space, you make a simple agreement with yourself. For these few minutes, I will practice being the observer of my impressions. I will notice the thoughts that arise. This traffic is unbearable. This line is too slow. This day is already too much, and I will practice not following them. I will practice holding them at arm's length. You're not trying to stop the thoughts. You're just practicing the pause, creating that tiny space between the impression and your belief in it. This is low-stakes training. It builds the neural pathway for when the bigger, more emotional impressions hit. Here's a commitment to consider. Tomorrow, give yourself one single assent workout. Choose one common trigger you know you'll face. It might be the ding of a new email, or the moment your child interrupts your work, or the feeling when you see a certain person's name pop up on your phone. Decide in advance that this will be your practice rep. When it happens, your only job is to notice the initial impression and consciously create one breath of space before you react. You don't have to get it perfectly right, you just have to try. That intentional effort, however small, is you lifting the weight. It's you strengthening the part of your mind that can choose instead of just obeying. What one trigger will you choose for your workout tomorrow? This discipline is part of a larger system. It doesn't work alone. It's the guardian for the other two. Stoic training was always 3 practices connected. There's the discipline of desire, that's about what you want, what you avoid. Then the discipline of action. That's how you behave with other people in the community. And in the middle, the discipline of assent. That's your judgment of what's true. You can think of them like a chain of command inside your own mind. Your assent, your judgment, that's the intelligence officer. It looks at the raw data and impression and decides what's real, what's true. That report then goes to the commander of desire, who decides what to pursue, what to let go, and then to the commander of action, who carries out the mission in the world. If the intelligence is wrong, if you assent to a false impression, then the whole operation is corrupted from the beginning. Your desires will chase phantoms, your actions will be misguided. That synergy is everything. The scholar Pierre had called this the Stoics' threefold focus. You focus your assent on agreeing only with clear, truthful impressions. You focus your desire on wanting only what is virtuous, what's in your power. And you focus your action on doing your duty with justice and kindness. But it all starts with that first focus, with seeing things as they are, not as your fears paint them or your wishes. Take one example to tie it together. You have a friend who's struggling. The discipline of desire might create the impulse, the want to help them. That's a good desire, a virtuous one, but that desire alone isn't enough. It needs the discipline of assent to guide it. You get an impression. Your friend seems withdrawn, sad. The automatic, faulty judgment might be to assent to the thought, they need my advice right now, my solutions. If you believe that story, your action, even though it's well-intentioned, becomes a barrage of fixes. Unsolicited, that often doesn't help. It can even push the person away. The flawed assent corrupted the good desire. It led to a misguided action. Now apply the trained assent. You have the same good desire to help, the same impression of their sadness, but you pause, you interrogate the impression. Is it true they want my solutions? Maybe they just need someone to listen. Maybe they need space. By withholding assent from that know-it-all narrative, you form a clearer judgment. My friend is in pain. The most helpful thing right now might be my quiet presence, not my advice. That truthful judgment then guides a virtuous action. You reach out, you say, I'm here for you. I'm listening if you want to talk. The action flows from clear seeing. That's the system in harmony. A flaw in assent is like a crack in a foundation. It throws everything else off. A mistaken desire for control comes from assenting to the lie that you can control externals. A harsh action toward a colleague comes from assenting to the story that they meant you harm. So trace it backward. Think of a time you acted in a way you later regretted, or wanted something that brought you frustration. Can you find the initial judgment, the story you agreed to, that started that chain? That moment of silent assent, that's where the leverage is for changing everything that comes after. Modern science is catching up to that old wisdom. They just use different names for it. In the middle of the last century, a therapy was developed. It became one of the most effective tools we have for mental health. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and its central idea is something the Stoics described 2,000 years ago, that events don't cause our emotions. Our beliefs about the events do. In therapy, they call these automatic thoughts. The Stoics called them impressions. It's the same thing, that instant story that appears in your mind. I'm going to fail, they don't like me, this is a catastrophe. The modern process uses cognitive distancing. That's the clinical term for the pause. It means stepping back from the thought. Seeing it as a mental event, not a fact. You learn to say, I am having the thought that I will fail, not I will fail. That small change in wording is the practice of withholding assent. You make space between you and the impression. You become the observer of your mind, not its prisoner. The connection goes further. CBT points out common cognitive distortions. These are the faulty reasoning patterns, the preconceptions Epictetus talked about, all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, personalization, mind reading. These are the specific ways our minds lie to us now, just as they did then. The technique is to challenge these distortions, to question the evidence for the thought and against it. To look for other explanations. It's the three-question cross-examination in modern terms. Is this completely true? What's the evidence? Is there a more balanced view? The goal is the same in both, to replace an automatic, distorted judgment with a conscious, accurate one, to move from a story that causes suffering to a perspective based in reality. You can see it in the tools. A basic CBT exercise is the thought record. It's a worksheet. You write down a difficult situation, the automatic thought, the emotion it caused, and then a more rational response. That structure is Seneca's evening review put on paper. It's a daily audit of your assents. You are keeping a record of where your judgment was taken over and where you took it back. This isn't an accident, it's a validation. It means that over 2,000 years, the most practical minds, Roman philosophers, clinical psychologists, they've arrived at the same truth. Your peace depends on questioning the first story your mind tells. So here's something to consider. If you've ever tried mindfulness to watch your thoughts without judgment, or used any cognitive behavioral technique, you've already been practicing a form of Stoic discipline. You were on the same path with a different map, seeing that these tools are connected, that ancient philosophy and modern psychology are saying the same thing that can be powerful. It tells you this isn't just an interesting idea, it's a fundamental mechanism of how our minds work, one you can learn to use with skill. Ataraxia, that's the word the Stoics used. It means freedom from disturbance, a calm that comes from inside, not from quiet surroundings. It's the result of mastering your assent. It's not about feeling nothing. It's about not being tossed around by feelings you didn't choose. It's the quiet when your mind stops sounding false alarms, when you're no longer jerked around by every convincing lie your own thoughts tell you. This tranquility is active. It's the stillness of a well-governed mind, not an empty one. Seneca wrote about this in On the Tranquility of Mind. He described the tranquil soul as one that can bear good and bad fortune without losing its balance. A soul that sees all events with a steady light, not because nothing matters, but because it sees what truly matters with perfect clarity. It's free from the violent emotional storms that come from believing every dramatic impression. Marcus Aurelius sought this same inner harbor. He reminded himself to retreat into his own mind, to be above the noise, to let the soul find its own calm. A calm that comes from assenting only to what is real and letting the rest pass by like clouds. Think of two people facing the same stressful day. A big presentation, then critical feedback, then a personal disappointment. The first person assents to every impression as it arrives. The nervous thought becomes a conviction of failure. The critique becomes a personal indictment. The disappointment becomes proof nothing ever works out. Their inner world is a storm. Anxiety, then defensiveness, then despair. They leave the day feeling battered, exhausted. The second person practicing the discipline faces the same events. They feel the same initial impressions, the flutter of nerves, the sting, the pang. But they pause, they interrogate, they withhold agreement from the catastrophic stories. They assent instead to clearer judgments. I am prepared and I will do my best. This feedback is information I can use. This disappointment is a single event, not the pattern of my life. Their inner world is not a storm, but a landscape. There is weather, moments of rain, of wind, but the ground is steady, the sky is vast. They respond from that steadiness, not from panic. They leave the same day tired, perhaps, but intact. Centered, unshaken, that's the difference between reactivity and response, between turbulence and tranquility. Imagine for a moment not being mentally lied to for a full day. What would that peace feel like? Not a blank peace, but a rich, quiet clarity. The space to hear your own thoughts, freedom from that constant background hum of worry, of second-guessing, of manufactured drama. It's the peace of coming home to your own mind and finding it a place of order. This ataraxia isn't a distant fantasy. It's the natural state of a mind that has learned to guard its gates. That has learned the most important agreement, to agree only with what is true. The discipline of assent isn't about feeling nothing. You can't stop the initial feeling. The fear, the anger, the jealousy, that's just a physiological event. It happens. The discipline starts after that. It's about the story you tell yourself next. The mistake is to think you have to deny the raw feeling. That suppression and that bottled-up tension eventually erupts. The Stoic path is different. You accept the feeling as a signal, as data. Then you question the narrative your mind builds on top of it. The feeling is a weather pattern in your body. The judgment is the forecast you write for your life. The discipline is editing that forecast for accuracy. This also isn't passive resignation. It's not shrugging at difficulty and saying, well, it's out of my control, so I'll do nothing. That's a corruption. The key is in the word assent. It's an active, deliberate choice. You're not passively accepting the external event. You're actively governing your internal interpretation. From that clear interpretation, action becomes possible, action that's measured and purposeful. Epictetus made this distinction. He said it's one thing to be carried away by an impression. To be used by it, it's another thing to use the impression, to take that raw data and subject it to your reason before you decide what it means. One is slavery to a feeling. The other is mastery through understanding. Take two people facing the same professional setback. A major project is cancelled. The first person, misunderstanding the discipline, tries to feel nothing. They stiffen, they push the disappointment down, they tell themselves they shouldn't be upset. That's suppression. The emotion, unexamined, leaks out as cynicism. As a quiet bitterness that poisons future projects. They've confused clarity with numbness. The second person practices true assent. They feel the sharp disappointment. They acknowledge it fully, then they pause, they interrogate the catastrophic story. My work was worthless, my career is off track. They withhold agreement from that fiction. Instead, they form a clear judgment. This project ended. I feel disappointed. My effort was not wasted. It developed my skills. I now have capacity for a new opportunity. From that truthful foundation, they take action. They update their portfolio. They speak to their manager about next steps. Their action springs from a clear assessment of reality, not from a reactive storm. This is active governance. The pitfall is to mistake the pause for paralysis, to think that by not immediately reacting with outrage, you are condoning a bad situation. But the opposite is true. By refusing to be hijacked by the first emotional story, you free up your cognitive resources to respond effectively. Your action becomes strategic instead of frantic, courageous instead of merely impulsive. So here's a question. Think of a past challenge where you felt you had to accept something difficult. In that moment, did your acceptance feel like a clear-eyed assessment that freed you to act wisely? Or did it feel more like a deflated giving up, a silent resignation that left you feeling powerless? The difference between those two states is the difference between being used by an impression and using it. That's the essence of the discipline. Your morning can set the tone for how you govern your mind. Before the day even starts, you can prepare that gatekeeper. It's a kind of mental drill, a simple ritual of intention. It only takes a couple minutes right after you wake up. You're setting the faculty of assent proactively before the world begins demanding your signature on its stories. The goal isn't to plan the day in detail. It's to declare sovereignty over your own judgments. Marcus Aurelius is the model here. His private journal, what we call his meditations, was basically his morning ritual written down. He'd start his day by reminding himself of fundamental truths, what's within his power and what isn't, the nature of the people he'd meet. He was priming his mind for clarity, not for reaction. Writing his own operating instructions for the day ahead, you can do a simplified version of this. Find a quiet moment, maybe with your morning coffee, before you check your phone. Close your eyes or just focus on your breathing for a few cycles. Then, internally, guide yourself through 3 clear statements. First, acknowledge the nature of the day. Say to yourself, today, impressions will come. They'll be strong and convincing. My job isn't to stop them, but to guard the gate of my assent. That sets the expectation. You're not trying for a blank mind. You're preparing to be an active participant. Second, recall the core filter. Remind yourself, some things are up to me and some are not. My judgments, my efforts, my character, these are mine. Everything else is external mail. I'll sort it accordingly. That reaffirms the dichotomy of control, placing it right at the forefront of your awareness. Third, set your intention. Resolve, today I will practice the pause. When a strong feeling arises, I'll create a space before I believe the story attached to it. I'll interrogate it with my 3 questions. That's your commitment to the practice itself. The whole script is brief. It might sound like, today, impressions will come. My job is not to stop them, but to guard the gate of my assent. I will remember what is mine and what is not. And when a judgment knocks, I will pause and interrogate before I agree. That's it. You're not casting a magic spell for a perfect day. You're performing a systems check on your most important tool, your reason, reminding your mind of its true function before it gets lost in the noise. For the next 3 days, try this. Before you dive into the stream of emails and notifications and tasks, give yourself these 2 minutes of intentional grounding. Then go about your day normally. Don't try to be perfect. Just carry that morning intention with you like a quiet note in your pocket. At the end of each day, ask yourself one simple question. Did that morning reminder make any difference in how I met the day's challenges? Did I catch myself even once, pausing where I normally would have rushed to agree? The ritual's power isn't in the words themselves. It's in the daily act of choosing, before anything else happens, to be the author of your judgments, not just the reader. Your mind will lie to you about how well you're learning not to be lied to. That's the final deception. You practice the pause, you interrogate a few thoughts. And then you have a day where you lose your temper, or you spiral for an hour over something you can't control, and the immediate impression arrives. I failed, this doesn't work, I'm not making progress. That impression is the ultimate test. It's a lie about progress itself, and it demands your assent. True progress here has nothing to do with the absence of error. It has to do with the quality of your awareness. The old you would have had the outburst and moved on, believing the story that justified it. The new you, even if you catch it a minute later, has done something revolutionary. You noticed. That noticing is the victory. The outburst is just data. It's the old wiring firing, but the noticing is the new circuitry being laid down. Epictetus taught this. He compared learning philosophy to learning to read. A child learning letters doesn't read perfectly from the start. They stumble. They mistake one letter for another. The teacher doesn't scold them for not being fluent. The teacher celebrates that they recognize the letter at all. Progress is like that. First you learn to recognize the impressions, then you learn to pause before assenting. Then you learn to interrogate. Each step involves mistakes. The mistake isn't proof of failure. It's the necessary material for learning. If you never made the mistake, you'd have nothing to correct. So that feeling of discouragement, that thought you're back at square one, is itself a false impression. It's your mind taking a single lapse and constructing a narrative of permanent failure. Your job is to see that narrative and to withhold your assent. Take an example, a frustrating exchange with a family member. Old patterns take over. You say something sharp, the conversation ends poorly. For a few hours you're stewing in resentment, believing they are the problem. Then later you remember the practice. You feel a wave of disappointment. I did it again. I assented to anger. I failed. That's the critical moment. That's where the mind lies. Instead of agreeing with that story of failure, you apply the discipline to the discipline itself. You pause. You see the thought "I failed" as an impression. You interrogate it. Is it true that no progress was made? The fact that you are now reflecting on it, that you even have the concept of assenting to anger, that is new. The old version of you would have remained in the resentment, justified and blind. This version is aware, even if the awareness came after the fact. That is progress. It's like learning a new language. Your first conversations are halting. You forget words, you misuse grammar. But the fact that you can now have a simple conversation at all, where before there was only silence, is the progress. The stumbles are part of the fluency. This is more than a technique. It's a conversation with reality. The discipline of assent at its deepest level isn't something you do for a while and then stop. It's a way of being in the world, a fundamental reorientation of your relationship with your own mind. You shift from being a passive consumer of thoughts to an active participant in your own consciousness. It becomes less about performing an exercise and more about inhabiting a perspective, a constant, gentle awareness of the thinking process itself. The goal is to make that careful, truthful assent a default mode. To live in a state of philosophical alertness where questioning your impressions is as natural as breathing. The Stoics didn't see this as a self-help hack. They saw it as the core of a philosophical way of life. For them, philosophy wasn't abstract debate. It was the art of living, and the very first brushstroke in that art was learning to see clearly. To assent only to what is real. Epictetus framed the whole endeavor that way. He said the philosopher's school is a doctor's office. You shouldn't leave feeling pleasure but feeling pain. Because you've come to be treated, to have your false judgments, your faulty assents exposed and corrected. This is the lifelong treatment, a commitment to mental hygiene. It's the daily practice of cleaning the lens through which you see everything. Over time, with consistent practice, the mechanics change. The pause and the interrogation don't feel like a separate, laborious process anymore. They become almost instantaneous, a seamless part of perception itself. You hear a critical comment, and in the same moment you feel the sting. A parallel awareness arises. This is an impression. I will examine it. The space between the event and your reaction, which once felt like a canyon you had to consciously bridge, becomes a natural part of the landscape. It's like learning to drive a car. At first, every action is deliberate. Check the mirror, signal, steer. Over years, it becomes fluid, integrated. You are simply driving. In the same way, you are simply perceiving with a built-in filter for truth. Imagine a setback at work. The old, untrained mind would be flooded with a story of failure. The trained mind, living this way of being, might experience a different sequence. The facts of the setback register. A feeling of disappointment arises. And simultaneously, a calm, internal voice notes, this is an external event. My worth is not attached to it. My task is to assess and adapt. The emotional wave is acknowledged, but it doesn't sweep you away. Because you never agreed to the story that would give it that power. The assent was given to a clearer, quieter narrative from the start. So here's a question to sit with, not for today, but for the long road ahead. What would it mean to make this careful, truthful assent a core part of your identity, not as a practitioner of Stoicism, but as a person committed to seeing the world and yourself without the comforting lies? It would mean walking through life with a quieter mind. It would mean your peace is built on the solid ground of what is true, not on the shifting sands of what you wish were true or fear might be true. This is the invitation of the discipline, not to complete a course but to begin a conversation, a lifelong conversation with reality where your only task is to listen and to agree only when you have heard the truth. You started out thinking your mind gave you the truth. You were seeing a world painted by these automatic stories about threat, about judgment, about things falling apart. You were caught by your own impressions, agreeing to suffer without even knowing the terms. Then, step by step, you learned how to guard that gate. You found the power in the pause, that space between the feeling and the story you tell about it. You built the skill of questioning. You'd ask, is this impression within my control? Is it objectively true? Does believing it serve who I want to be? You saw how that careful agreement, that deliberate assent, is what forges your character. It's the direct route to a calm that doesn't need the world to be perfect. It just needs a mind that sees clearly. The noise hasn't stopped. The world still sends its impressions, dramatic and urgent, but you're not just receiving them anymore. You're the one in charge of your inner fortress. Marcus Aurelius left a reminder about this, written during his own practice. He said you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize that, and you find strength. That strength is a quiet confidence. It comes from knowing the most important agreement you'll ever make is with reality itself. That power to stop your mind from lying to you, it was never something to find outside. It's always been inside, in your faculty of choice, in that silent moment before you say yes or no.